Nicola Wellspring lies upon the cold stone of a forbidden roof. The surface is cool in the darkness of midnight. The sky is wondrous. He snuck here to the top of the tomb of the ancient Emperor Edesi. It's not an act of veneration or faith. The tomb had long ago taken on the dual role as temple to the devourer. No, Nicola chooses not to worship that file god any more than he can avoid. He's here for the astronomy. Just before the local suns faded, Nicola gazed out at the darkening canopy. Edesi's tomb was bigger than any other, taller than Kamasi's by 20 feet. The tops of the tombs were the only place where one could see for miles rather than feet. His home, the pocket plane of Ninsweta, drifts on its eternal course through the astral plane. The sky is forever changing states as its path takes it close to 1,000 phenomenon, most of which have no names. Some of those things are living entities, astral titans, elemental immensities, and even stranger, more unique beings that have been known to settle on Ninsweta to hunt or simply bring suffering. Astronauticus Superius is the name Nicola found for the wonder he watches tonight. The worn pages of a prohibited book say it could be as large as the whole of Ninsweta, that it could consume all he knows with little more effort than the boy might squash a beetle. According to the new arts of math, he estimates the cyclopean squid is thousands of miles away. No need to be afraid. The astral beast's following tentacles shimmer in waves of rainbow hues across the sky. The night before, he watched it change course, and since it's grown smaller. There are other observations to be made. A white double orb rotates in the south. Another week and it'll be gone, along with a dim swarm of red comets in the east. Those had caused a panic when the elders of the village identified them as dragons and predicted an imminent invasion. Nicola kept his mouth shut. He didn't believe they were dragons, but speaking out could earn harsh punishments, even a death sentence. Still, his attitude of dissent goes far beyond doubting their predictions. He quietly disputes their honesty. If they really believed such things as an attack from an interstellar horde of dragons might occur, why not support opening the jungle borders to neighboring states? Surely a coordinated defense would be preferable to going it alone. The next day, Nicola meets his betrothed for breakfast before making his report at the temple. The marriage was arranged by the town elders in an attempt to preserve tradition. Nicola is an acolyte at the Temple of Shadow, well known to stray towards liberalism in their quest for knowledge. Yala was chosen to become a sorceress of the snake, a far more conservative faction within the city and among the Bella people in general. However, Yala is no conservative. The two plan to escape their home city of Guna Rubatan as soon as they have the means. This is one possible way to start a campaign in almost any setting. The youth of a conservative region seek to escape the old ways and explore the world beyond. Maybe Nicola and Yala find a new life with new boundaries, or maybe they grow to understand the wisdom of the culture that brought them together. Let's throw in a few side notes. The Devourer expanded. The Bella view the Devourer differently than most. To them, the god is the embodiment of the jungle and its inevitable digestion of everything civilized folk might think or be tempted to think as permanent. The philosophy of the old ways. Prominent in the interior of the region, the Bella, Sifron, and the Martinique people groups all have a portion of their population keen on little more than watching the decay around them. In some extremes, this turns into cultism involving forms of necromancy and the construction of flesh golems. For most, it simply means an attitude of nihilistic stagnation. Defining people groups, ethnicity. This is a large and potentially controversial subject. In my Pelicar project, I got pretty heavy into racial descriptions. See Dresden's Tale videos on this channel. Skin color, qualities of the hair, prominent features, height, that sort of thing. In a living campaign world, you might want to leave it alone. It's important to players to feel comfortable in their character's skin, so to speak. A tiefling's horns, an elf's ears, a tabaxi's fur, or anyone's skin are things best left to the players. In fact, you might just want to use the player's concept of their character's appearance to mold the local ethnicity. Collaborative world building is rarely a bad idea. However, other cultural traits are fair game, and they are frankly the most delicious part of world building. When the party is discussing what course of action they should take, and one of the party declares, the cultural mantra of everyone is responsible for filling their own larder, oh, it'll make a GM proud. Alright, well, that probably is a little bit vague without context, and it's a long story, so anyway, we'll skip that for now. The Bella, Siffron, and the Martinique are not the only people groups in Belle Ni Gence, but they dominate the central regions, and that's kind of where we're focusing. They are all similar in appearance, so if you're ignoring my advice from above, most of the associated species of Velito are dark-skinned and shorter than average. The Bella are the largest group, with their key identifiers coming down to 3 major points. First is the building of tombs. Near undead fields, the tombs hold remains burnt to ash, but mummified bodies are more common. All the people of the region are similar, but only the Bella believe the souls of unentombed bodies will decay. Second, the Bella are known for a hairstyle involving weaving beads and sticks of fine woods into their hair. The style is less common among the coastal dwellers, but even in these liberal communities it's used on important days or celebrations. Finally is the possession of a rot jar. This jar is given to a child on the passing of their third Chartin. This significant astral phenomenon is an event filling the sky with green streaks of light for a period of days. These are irregular over the short haul, but most children get them around the age of 6. Unfortunately, I cannot go as deeply into the Siffron or the Martinique in a video of reasonable length. I'll just say that when working with cultural groups, make sure you think about the little things. Also, I'd like to reinforce that even these groups are not completely the same within. Being closer to the mountains or living amongst the central lakes will create subcultures. The major rift right now is attitudes towards money and commerce between the coastal peoples and inland, with coastal inhabitants being more open to rudimentary capitalism. These cities are the destination of Nicola and Yala. They and a small group of friends adventure in the wilds for nearly a year before reaching the great port city of Grabu Adin. In many ways, it's the same. There are great tombs on the hilltops. Some are the homes of ancient heroes, but many are the resting places of thousands of common urban dwellers. They rise up out of the jungle, great stone buildings requiring a full 20% of the workforce to maintain and expand. Back home, the problem is even worse with low participation in the workforce. Here, the workers are paid from revenues brought in by overseas trade. The city exports rare lumber ranging from black mangrove to bitterwoods. Crates of hardwood pins line the dock, milled from bronzewood. They are better than nails in many applications. The Midland bronzewoods are even good for producing shields, which the Martinique druids are able to enchant to +1 magical bonuses. It's a product that makes it worthwhile for Easterners to sail their fast schooners all the way to jungle ports. These schooners bring thin wool clothing for trade, creating another visual cue to differentiate islanders from the coast dwellers. Flax is sometimes imported across the mountains to the east, but most native clothing is silk or a weave of husk vine. Realistically, the latter is a lot like flax, but it does a poor job of holding dye. The light wools imported into western ports arrive in brilliant, vibrant colors common to sea folk, but rare to an inland region. It pays to be seen when adrift in the sea, but can be a severe detriment when hunting deep in a jungle. These rules are not always true, but have shaped the opinion of fashion over the centuries. For the urban populations of Belle Ni Gence, that's all clothing is, a fashion choice. Among the young and otherwise progressive, bright wools provide something new and popular, a way to stand out. The jungle supplies more than just lumber. In fact, that product is pretty limited due to logging regulations, largely due to religious reasoning. Dyes are now being developed from jungle sources to meet new demands. And there's more. You always hear about the Amazon as an underexploited pharmacy. The same is true here, with the concept expanded to enchantment and alchemy. There's just more life. The canopy of the Amazon is about 100 to 120 feet. That's a lot of space for things to live. The jungles of Belle Ni Gence get a little less rain, but grow taller. At 240 feet, the canopy is multi-level, creating even more diversity. That's how Nicola and Yala earn a living between big, flashy missions that adventurers covet. They collect air bells from the Adirial Islands, red vine from the Midnight Gorges, and gray wool from the fir trees of the Espera River Valley. What are these Adirial Islands? In certain parts of the jungle, under just the right conditions, Adirial Islands form around the 90-foot mark. It's here, at exactly the proper humidity and iron levels, edral vines snake out from tree to tree, forming a tight weave. Over decades, leaf litter collects, and just the right species of ant moves in. Over time, acreages of new land are formed well above the ground. Creatures roam, and new trees begin to grow. Sadly, every Adirial is doomed to one day collapse under the weight of its own success. And you said Midnight Gorges? It's not a stretch to realize it can get pretty dark at ground level sometimes. 200 feet of intertwined limbs, leaves, and vines can do that. Some portions of the forest, it gets even worse. The terrain can be exceedingly rough in places. Over centuries, rivers and beasts alike have cut the land, creating deep, thin gorges. Some are nearly 100 feet down, most are around 40. Those referred to as midnight gorges have bottoms that never see the light of day. These depths often see conditions similar to the underneath, with growths of luminous plants or simply creatures adapted to sightless environments. Next big topic, food production. Belle Ni Gence supports a number of large inland cities and hundreds of significant towns with populations exceeding 1,000 pop. This is no small matter feeding them when clear cutting is off the table. Farming is rare in the jungle as religious prohibitions prevent extensive cultivation. Corn is raised in some valleys, as is rice, where the land will cooperate. These are a boon to the local population, but never enough to export. So what allows for the large population to sustain itself? What about stringer beans? Yellow and black spot beans have been eaten in the jungle since the beginning of time. Centuries ago, the local Velito discovered that the vines could be trained along woven strands of husk vines, greatly increasing production. Now, a strong acre of forest can produce as many calories as an acre of wheat in more arable lands. And then there's one of my favorites, the castano nut. I've used these guys in jungle settings before. Nothing wrong with recycling ideas from project to project. These vines grow in the upper canopy of the forest's tallest trees. They produce a fruit similar to a walnut, but a little beefier and a little harder to get into. They are hard to cultivate, but can be harvested in the wild several times a year. Relatively few animals can crack a castano, leaving them available for Velito who can make the climb. It's labor intensive, with a lone harvester able to reliably gather enough nuts to feed a family with enough left over to support a meager lifestyle. Over-harvesting will lead to shortages. However, properly managed, the food source is more reliable than hunting. That's enough about food. Let's talk about the government. Officially, there is a body of appointed diplomats who handle international affairs. They oversee issues of national defense. This is highly neglected. Trade, where their authority is overshadowed at ports of entry. And foreign outreach, seriously underfunded. Even local governments are pretty weak. Churches are the most usual source of authority. Often law and justice are purely spiritual matters and highly corrupted. Over the last 50 years, the interests of commerce have come to dominate coastal norms. Tariffs, often determined and enforced on the spot, are a major source of income, creating a new elite class of dockmasters. And of course, with wealth comes power. Should be noted, from a foreigner's point of view, these are extremely dangerous ports to operate out of. Ships are often impounded and crews ransomed. However, successful trips can produce wild profits. A case of bronzewood nails goes for a piece of gold in Grabu Aden and sells for 10 at a port just a few hundred miles away. Oops, that's economics. Back to government. So let's see. Non-existent federal, churches that can garner power under the right leadership, and growing eco-power on the coast. You would think this would be a great place for warlords to grab power, but that really hasn't traditionally been the case. Despots and demagogues have been short-lived around here. Instead, rural communities survive on the same dynamic as a clan or informal alliance of family groups where the elder members are revered as being closer to life's final stages of rot. These collaborations are almost always within people groups. Most large towns and cities can be said to exist as extremely primitive oligarchies where the leaders of churches, trade interests, and elders work together to preserve order and provide services. They constantly threaten to drift into anarchy. It's not unusual for towns to fail and populations to factionalize. The extreme south is somewhat different in this regard. The southern coast is largely ruled by beings known as the Madur Asai apes, as named by region. They often refer to themselves as Sylvan apes, though there is no evidence of Fey ancestry. They may very well be a distant cousin to Rakshasa. Stat block pending. Over the last 10 years during which they have consolidated power, it has had a significant effect on the area that was already somewhat separate from the rest of the region. Yeah, it's all a giant tease. As usual, it takes far more effort to do a region justice than we have time to explore on YouTube. For the most part, I feel like we are very much in the opening phases of world building on this channel. We have a lot of basic work left to do, and many of you have shown an interest in seeing Ensweta expanded. Maybe it will get added to that list of published settings that might get done someday. You may have noticed that you got away without an intro this time, but you're stuck with the outro. Remember to check out my work on Amazon. Just Google Lewis Nichols on Amazon. I've got work on Inkarnate. Guess what? Google Lewis Nichols on Inkarnate. And I really am serious about building up a body of work on D&D Beyond. Luckily, is it lucky? Anyway, most of my work is independent of 5.5, but it will affect the channel as our secondary niche. More on that as we get closer to it. Now, my last community poll got exactly 2 votes, so you guys are slacking. In fact, I think I was one of those votes. So, our next biome is going to be something weird. I'm really curious to see what my brain interprets that to mean. But we've got at least one more exercise before that, either forest or forest adjacent. Now, if you've had enough of my rambling, just hit the like button, tell your friends about me, and leave a comment. I love you all very much. Have a great rest of the day. Cheers.